I love what the band does with that song. Woo! Our theological theme this month is transcendence. What is that about? There are several ways to think about this particular theological theme. In classical theological studies, by which I mean Western thought, the dominant mode of thought that has shaped U.S. culture, transcendence has to do with the idea that there's a divine spirit or a God that exists beyond this world. It's the idea that God is somewhere apart from all of this, and that beyond the natural world, beyond what can be studied, there's something else. In contrast to that kind of transcendence, or you might say closer to home, there's another concept, and that's immanence. Transcendence is the idea that God or the divine is out there somewhere, and immanence is the idea that the divine is right here in the world with us. They sound kind of like opposites, out there and right here, transcendence and immanence, but the two ideas can go together, and sometimes they do. Panentheists believe God is in the natural world, in the Rio Grande and the Sandia Mountains and the Magdalenas, and that God also transcends it, here and there, near and far. This is an all-encompassing kind of God in panentheism. It makes me think of the phrase, the love that holds all. Another school of thought is pantheism. That was panentheism. This is pantheism. Pantheists believe God is just in the natural world, that God and the world are one, and God and the moon are one, and God and the stars, and God is in everything, but there is not a separate thing. That's God. That's pantheism. And at this point, the concept of God is getting very expansive. It's definitely not the guy in the sky version, right? It has more to do with a spirit of life or a creative force that is at the essence of all things, including humans. This tends to resonate with a lot of Unitarian Universalists. And we're on a bit of a continuum here. We've got God way out there somewhere, God here and there, God just here. And if you continue along it, you might arrive at religious naturalism. And that's a way of seeing the natural world as religiously meaningful without God. Right? We're getting right down close to home. Religious naturalism is a kind of atheism or humanism, and it addresses spiritual concepts like beauty and what moves us and what we are and what this means, and belonging to something larger than our seemingly distinct selves, and it does it without any divine or supernatural kind of elements. My sense is that about a third of this congregation shares the values and the perspective of religious naturalism, though you might not have heard it called by that name before. Actually, in the next few months, there's going to be a couple of opportunities to study and to deepen in religious naturalism together in small groups. So if that appeals to you, keep an eye out on the newsletter and the weekly email announcements for more information about that. But there are also a couple of other ways to interpret our theme of transcendence. One has to do with the idea of transcending ourselves, with being more than this body and mind, but having some kind of an impact that goes beyond ourselves in big and small ways. I'm going to preach about that on Father's Day. And finally, another kind of transcendence has to do with the self that does all these things and thinks all these things. We go through changes all our lives. We start out as these little squishy critters. We can't talk, right? And we awaken to our consciousness at some point, and then we just transform and transform all our lives long, growing and learning. We change and change. And this is what I asked our Bridging Youth to reflect on for today's service. What transcends your life's changes? What is at your center or your core? What about your childhood self and your adult self makes you the same person? What transcends your life's changes? What is at your center or core? And what about your childhood self and your adult self makes you the same person the whole time? They are three beautifully different people who each answered this question in their own way. We'll hear from Ruth first.
Hello. The vast majority of you don't know me. You may know my face, but you probably know little of who I am, the care that I've put into the district-wide UU youth community, the importance that I put on honesty and frankness. Or you probably don't even know my love for chocolate. Hello. My name is Ruth, and I'm standing in front of you talking. High school, adulthood. Each term comes with very different and very deep connotations, implications, expectations, and stereotypes. It sounds like a very important transition. High school has teenagers. What a loaded term. I've heard so much about teenagers, most of it dehumanizing, stereotyping, and condescending. Therefore, it clearly must be a huge improvement to finally graduate to adulthood and all the qualities it comes with. Responsibility, maturity, patience, wise use of social media, qualities of ideal citizens, descriptors of people who listen and are listened to, who are respectful and respected, wise people deserving of respect, like the president. Wait. There's something wrong with this whole picture. If we associate adulthood with all these qualities, why are so many adults denying obvious problems like gun violence and climate change? And if teenagers have none or relatively few of these qualities, why is it that we are the ones who have to push for change because the supposedly responsible adults don't act on what they say or won't sacrifice their gilded age comforts to address these problems? These may be challenging questions to hear, but my peers and I are facing them and find them to be frustrating and overwhelming. It's important to realize that this is something we live with. I say bridging and other ceremonies around this time of year, such as graduations and 18th birthdays, don't note significant changes. Reality is far more complex, awkward, and difficult than can be noted wholly in one ceremony. A transition to adulthood is far too often in society's view a transition into a person finally deserving respect, a change from a body and mind that isn't old enough to have real feelings, real concerns, real worth, or real dignity into a complete person. This false change occurs with a ceremony, a graduation, a bridging, a birthday. The importance of this change is fake. We are not the sum of the bridges we've crossed. No ceremony creates a person. No graduation gives experience or education. No coming of age creates a caring individual. No birthday creates a competent student. These things are developed gradually on the roads between bridges, by persistence, by time, by living. Perhaps acknowledging the road and the journey is important. To this end, these ceremonies have real value. They can recognize the work, the path, the time that we as people have put into growing, learning, living. But first, people need to realize that the people graduating or bridging or celebrating their birthday have been people all their lives. We've been people all our lives. I've been a person all my life. I have been living for nearly 18 years now, and all through my life, I've always been as much of a person as I am now. I have always had my own identity, my own soul, my own cares, my own values. But what makes me a unique person isn't what many adults talk to me about. They say and again, "You used to be so little. How cute, how sweet you used to be." And they ask what I want to major in and where I'm going to college. These are things I share with thousands, possibly millions of people. How could someone possibly know me from them? My individuality, my identity, my ideas cannot be constructed from a picture of how I looked in elementary school, the college I'm going to, and what I'm thinking of majoring in. What I am is not in the past or the future. It's in what I care about now and what I am doing now. Bridging, graduation, entering college, all acknowledge that society is changing the label it puts on me. Few people could see through the label which covered my name tag and said high schooler and teenager, but it made a huge difference when they did. It can be hard to look through the labels to people's name tags, but I think respecting people's individuality and uniqueness all through their lives is critical to affirming people's inherent worth and dignity. Appreciating others as complex, imperfect, and whole is something I care deeply about. And as I get older, I hope that I continue to view it as an important part of my life. Perhaps when I'm old enough, I will return to the youth community as an adult and help make sure that others have the opportunities I did. Thank you.
There's so many ways to express ourselves and to love and to be loved. Did you guys see Alan Stringer make a cameo in that? He was our longtime music director who died earlier this spring. And he certainly reached beyond himself, too. Our last reflection is from Bridget Simpson.
The last few weeks of senior year, we were counting down the days, and it was long, and it seemed never, ever, ever ending. And while I was endlessly waiting for graduation, I kept reminding myself of the cliche but nevertheless true saying, "This too shall pass." It often doesn't seem like it, but good or bad, the vast majority of things in our lives change at some point. Our environment, our relationships, our values, our focus, and our beliefs, they change. Because everything will change. But what won't? I believe that there's something at all of our cores that never changes. It's that something bigger that animates the universe. It's something that goes by many names, and it's defined differently for every person. And I personally just vaguely call it the universe. This core will always be there, and it will remain constant. It's our perception that changes. I recently went back to my kindergarten and elementary school. And if you've ever been back to a key place in your childhood, you might understand the feeling I got there. Everything was very tiny. And I was taken aback by how small the once giant chairs were. But apparently those chairs have always been that small, and the only difference is my perception of them. Going back to that something bigger, I reflect on my middle school coming-of-age speech. Back then, I was pretty adamant that we're just a coincidence of physics and that there's nothing bigger, we're just here. But now I've begun to connect to that core, acknowledge that there might be something more to the universe. I don't know what that is yet. I'll get back to you on that one. But I know that it will change over my lifetime as I continue to collect new memories, gain new experiences, and learn new things to help me put together this impossible puzzle.
Bridgers, would you come and stand near the edge of the platform? And we have one more bridger. Teresa, you want to come and join us up here? Teresa Sauco is also bridging, and she wasn't able to help with the planning of this service, but we're glad to have her with us this morning. Will you rise in body or spirit and join me in the affirmation that's on the insert in your order of service? Oh, Mia Noren, will you come up also? Mia is the director of our programs for youth and children. The congregation's unison words. We honor your transition from youth to young adult. We see the work, the path, the time. You're growing, learning, living. We celebrate with you.
We give thanks that you are part of our community. We celebrate all that you have been, who you are now, and all you will be.
Blessings upon these young people and upon their families, and blessings upon the congregation that creates, through everyday acts of showing up and giving and affirmation, a spiritual community for all that is our lives.